The wind that moved across the Turner ranch always sounded lonely. It whistled through the cottonwoods, rattled the barn door, and carried the faintest echo of laughter long gone. Elias Turner had stopped listening for it years ago. He lived quiet now, his world reduced to the creak of saddle leather, the low murmur of cattle, and the scrape of a shovel against dry earth. A man could get used to silence if he had to. He'd done just that after the fire, the one that took his wife, Mary, and their unborn child. At least, that's what he believed. He never remarried. Never left the land they'd built together. Each spring, when the first lilacs bloomed by the fence, he'd set one small bloom in a mason jar by the window, Mary's favorite. Then he'd go about his work, because that was all a man like him could do. Until the day the dust rose again, not from wind this time, but from a wagon coming up the road. Elias saw it from the corral while feeding the horses. The wagon was small, drawn by an old gray mare. He squinted, lifting a hand to shade his eyes. Strangers didn't come this far out. He watched as it came to a slow stop in front of the house. The driver climbed down, a woman, slender and sunburned, wearing a faded shawl. Behind her sat two small girls, no more than 5, each clutching a worn doll made of cloth and string. Something in the way the woman moved, cautious but familiar, sent a shiver through him. She looked up, and his heart stumbled. "Elias," she said softly, her voice cracking like a dry branch. He froze. That voice. It couldn't be. "Mary," he whispered. The woman nodded once, tears brimming in eyes he'd dreamed of too many nights to count. Her face was thinner, her hair streaked with gray, but it was her. And then, before he could find words, 2 little girls climbed down and ran to him. One tugged at his coat. "Are you Pa?" The other stood behind her sister, eyes wide, shy as a colt. Elias dropped to one knee. For a long, trembling moment he couldn't speak. His throat burned, his chest felt hollow. He reached out, hands shaking, and brushed the dust from the nearest child's cheek. They were Mary's eyes. Her smile. Tears blurred the world. "You must be," he said hoarsely, "the reason I kept this place standing." Mary covered her mouth with her hand, sobbing quietly. They stayed the night in the old guest room, the one Elias hadn't opened in years. He sat by the hearth long after everyone had gone to bed, staring into the fire. When she came out, wrapped in a quilt, he didn't look up. "I buried you," he said, voice rough. "I saw the wagon burn near the pass. The marshal said no one could have made it." Mary sank into the chair across from him. "I almost didn't," she whispered. "The wagon caught fire after lightning struck the tree. I got thrown clear. A ranch family found me, but by the time I woke, I didn't remember who I was. It took years before the pieces came back, your name, the ranch, everything." Elias stared at the fire, jaw tight. "And the girls?" Her face softened. "Born in Utah, after I remembered. Twins. Yours, Elias. From before the fire." He leaned back, covering his face with both hands. It was too much. Too wide a flood of grief, disbelief, gratitude. When he finally spoke, his voice broke. 5 years. I thought God had taken every reason I had to breathe." Mary reached across the table and took his calloused hand. "He was just waiting to give you back what you needed most." By morning, the ranch didn't sound lonely anymore. The girls, Clara and June, filled every corner with life. They chased chickens, climbed hay bales, and asked 1,000 questions. Elias, awkward at first, found himself smiling again, slowly, quietly, as if afraid the joy might break if he moved too fast. When Clara asked if he'd teach her to ride, he built a small saddle from scraps of leather and stayed up half the night sanding it smooth. When June tripped and scraped her knee, he carried her into the house like she was made of glass. Mary laughed softly at the sight. "You've gone soft, Cowboy." He smiled back. "I just remembered what it feels like to care." Summer settled over the plains in waves of gold. The ranch, once half empty, came alive with motion. Elias taught the twins how to feed the hens, how to brush the horses, and how to tell a good sunset from a great one. Some evenings, Mary would hum while she cooked, the sound floating through the open windows. He'd pause mid-work just to listen. One afternoon, he found her out near the lilac bush. She was kneeling, trimming away dead branches. The girls were gathering blossoms in their small hands. "You still remember," he said quietly. She looked over her shoulder, smiling. "How could I forget? You used to bring me one every morning when we first built the place." He took a slow breath, eyes glistening. "I never stopped." She set down the shears and walked to him. The wind moved through her hair, carrying the scent of lilac and dust. "I'm sorry, Elias," she whispered. For the years you lost. He shook his head. Don't you see? They weren't lost. They were waiting. As autumn came, the twins started helping with chores. They carried feed buckets half their size, giggling as they tripped over boots too big for their feet. Elias watched them from the porch each morning, heart full in a way he hadn't known was possible. He often thought back to the man he'd been, hard, quiet, angry at the world. Now he found himself laughing at spilled milk and muddy footprints. Mary teased him one night as they sat by the fire. Never thought I'd see the day you smiled at chaos. He grinned. Reckon it took the right kind of chaos. Winter brought snow, soft as wool and heavy on the eaves. The ranch became a small, glowing island in a world of white. The girls built snowmen by the barn, wrapping them in scarves too long. Mary baked bread that filled the house with warmth. One night, after the twins were asleep, Elias stood by the window watching the snow fall. Mary joined him, slipping her hand into his. You ever think about what might have been? She asked softly. He turned to her, eyes gentle. No, I think about what is. You're here. They're here. That's more than I ever thought I'd get. She smiled through tears. You always were the steady one. He chuckled. No, ma'am. I just finally learned how to wait long enough for a miracle. By spring, the Turner Ranch was alive again. Horses grazed in fresh pastures, wildflowers bloomed along the creek, and the house echoed with laughter. One evening, Elias rode up the ridge overlooking the valley. The girls ran to meet him, their small boots kicking up dust. He lifted them onto the saddle, one on each knee. You see that, girls? He said, pointing to the horizon. That's all ours now. Not just mine, ours. June's eyes sparkled. Even the hills? Especially the hills. Clara leaned her head against his shoulder. We're gonna stay forever, right, Pa? Elias swallowed hard, his voice thick. Forever and a day. Mary watched from the porch, the setting sun painting her in gold. For the first time since the fire, she looked at peace, like a woman finally home. And when the wind moved through the grass that evening, it didn't sound lonely anymore. It sounded like laughter. Like life. Like the world itself had taken a deep breath and decided to start over. Elias turned his horse toward the house, two little girls giggling beside him, and whispered a quiet prayer of thanks. Because sometimes the frontier doesn't take everything away. Sometimes it just takes a while to give it back.